In the beginning, there was darkness. And then out of that darkness grew plants and vegetation and dinosaurs and people and religions and mythologies and civilizations were erected and wars broke out and genocide and wars and genocide and colonizations and then America and then Michigan. And then in Michigan came a lonely redheaded pagan who met his Christian buddy Matt uh, at a company and said, "Hey, let's create a comic series for the world to teach lessons if they want to learn from." And I am that person. I am that redheaded pagan. I'm Dylan. Welcome back to the Unfound Anamnesis. This has been a super fun 4 weeks. Quick update on the Unfound Anamnesis. We've been going now for about 4 weeks. We're still at about 53 subscribers, have about 100 followers through Facebook and Instagram, and we just passed 1,000 views on YouTube. So thank you to all of you that have been watching, that have been liking it. We really appreciate the support. I've been hearing a bunch when I'm out and about saying, "Hey, we love what you're creating." If you love what we're creating, do me a favor now, click like, click subscribe, leave a comment, show us that you like it. Through this, we understand this isn't for everybody, but we can find our avatar, our target audience that really digs what we're creating and wants to be a part of the Unfound Anamnesis moving forward. Our following's been awesome, though. We have a couple of new characters that are coming just because of our following. Our following has started to name some of the Azigras that have been attacking Bestunia, really starting to get more traction on Facebook, which has been awesome. What else is happening? New lessons that we can teach. We're going to be doing more Unfound Inspirations, and we're actually going to be talking about comics, anime, video games that have inspired Unfound Anamnesis that we're pulling from to create the Unfound Anamnesis. And I'm going to be working with some of our following. So a lot of that comes from you all. That's what we want to create with the Unfound Anamnesis. We'd love to get to a point where we can create a Patreon of people that want to continue to support, get their ideas across, so we can use that to be able to fund this, right? Be able to fund our illustrator. So right now it's completely free. So hop on while you can, give us ideas while you can, while it's free. We really appreciate the support. We've went over a lot. Last week we talked about the philosophy of the Unfound Anamnesis, the beginning of Bestunia, the premise of it all, the idea of allegory and identity, what goes into making a main character in Joan that we can all relate to, but kind of hate and kind of love at the same time. And then Matt gave you a history lesson of Bestunia. He took you through the 4 eras, right? He took you through the creation era or the discovery era. He took you through the era of order, where Argus had his sages that spread order and understanding and education throughout Bestunia. Then he took you through the time of the crumble, where runic knowledge was becoming almost too much and it was too big of a light. The Azigr were attacking more. The time of the crumble also brought the no beasts. It also brought some people that were born with only one path in life. And then that led to the time of the fall, which is where we're at currently when these comics will come out. First comic will be released in December, by the way. And in that first episode, we're going to be living in the time of the fall. The god is gone. James went to find him, thought he found him, found nothing, came back empty-handed to a daughter who hates him. That daughter is our main character, Joan, who then magically gets a beast at the age of 13 that not only happens to be the first beast that's been gifted in the last 15 years, but it is the missing god himself, whose name is Buntu. That's a lot, right? You should be a little confused. That's why we're creating these videos before the comic is released, to give you a little more of the history behind it all. And this week, we're going to kind of go back to, in the beginning there was darkness, and out of the darkness came everything. We're going to go to the actual origin story of the unfound anamnesis itself, the cosmos of the unfound anamnesis. And in the next week, we're going to talk about the God, Ubuntu, that created Bastunia, what he was thinking when he created it, what led to him taking his eye off the ball, and what led to him going missing in the first place. But unfound anamnesis started about 8 years ago when I was living overseas, when I did a bunch of traveling through my consulting company. One of my biggest fascinations was learning about the religions of where I was at. So I grew up Catholic. So I learned about that, the original origin story of in the beginning there was nothing, and then there was light, and then God created all those things, and God said they were good, right? And then I learned more about, Greek mythology because I was a nerd growing up. And in the beginning, again, there was this darkness, what they call chaos, and out of the chaos came the 5 primordial beings, one of which was Erebus, who's actually the god of darkness. But then my travels took me to India, where I learned about Hinduism and their creation mythology, where Brahma created all things from himself, and then his creation was preserved by Vishnu, and it will eventually be destroyed by Shiva, only to be created again by Brahma and preserved by Vishnu, in this virtuous cycle that happens. And then I went to Africa. I lived in Africa for about 3 years. And, obviously there's the religions of Egypt, Egyptian mythology, where people were created from the eye of Re, when the eye went missing from Re, and 2 deities went out to find it, and the eye started crying, and from those tears created man. Very fascinating origin story. And I remember when I was living in Kenya, I would always ask the people that I was working with, Kenyans speak very good English, what is it that Kenyans believed, before Christianity? Most of Kenya is Christian now, some Islam, but Muslims, I should say. But I remember having a really cool moment with a sales rep, and we were driving to the field, and the sun was rising from Mount Kenya, the second largest peak in the continent of Africa. And he said, hey, you've asked this before, but a lot of people believe that the God existed in Mount Kenya in the beginning of time, because out of Mount Kenya, the sun would rise. It was the God that gave them light. There's darkness, and the God gives them light. And he said, yeah, and the first people believed that God was in all things. God was in the sun, was in the mountain, was in the trees and the people. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And the next sentence out of his mouth was, yeah, we were pretty dumb before Christians came along. And my gut kind of hurt with that. I'm like, can it be both? Can't that also be beautiful? And you can learn great lessons from Christianity. But nonetheless, I was fascinated with origin stories. This, coupled with my desire to write, that started at a very young age, created this time in my life where I'm like, what if I could create a cool origin story? What would it look like? And what I was just picking up earlier was my original poster boards. There's 8 of these, I think. Original poster boards where I created the entire backstory of the origin of the unfound anamnesis. Now, not all of this is used anymore, but there's still a lot of it to be used. The unfound anamnesis was actually, the main character originally was going to be Ubuntu, the god of Bastunia. And speaking with one of my mentors, he said, well, no one really wants to follow a god as a main character because they can't really relate to a god. You need to give us some type of person to be able to relate to that god so we can relate to the person. And then I went back to the drawing board and I started thinking of what if that person was on Earth? And then that got boring quick. And I'm like, well, what if I just created my own world? And that created Bastunia. But I still took all of my origin of the unfound anamnesis and the laws of it to shape Bastunia into what it is. So with all that said, that's what we're going to talk about this week. This week, we're going to talk about the origin of the unfound, the cosmos of the unfound anamnesis. how we got to where we're at right now at Bestunia and where we're going. What Joan and Artie are really getting themselves into, attaching themselves to Ubuntu. So, with that being said, we'll go into our own origin story, because the universe of the unfound anamnesis, the cosmos of the unfound anamnesis, begins in darkness. And out of that darkness, there came two beings, the original beings of this universe. They're celestial beings, and we just named them Mother and Father. And along with them came something else, what we call the essence. Now, essence is unfound anamnesis' ultimate God. It is nameless, it is sexless. It just, the best way to describe it is it just was and it is. And this essence partly exists in the universe of the unfound anamnesis and partly exists in what we call the before, right? Mother and Father step out of the darkness, but we don't know where they're stepping from. A lot of origin stories start that way. They say darkness and then something comes up and we're like, yeah, but where did it come from? This is one of those origin stories. Mother and Father step out of the darkness, and along with them comes this essence. Essence is part here, part in the before. I keep looking at my notes over here. And this is what we would call the beginning of time. Now, I've said two words that I want us to use loosely as we move forward with this. Beings. Anytime we say beings, we just think of ourselves because it just makes sense. We just need to make sense out of things. So we say beings, they look like us. They don't really, Mother and Father don't really look like us. They're these giant crystalline primordial figures that might have humanoid shape to them, but they're not like us beings. And we also say the beginning of time. We have created a rigidity around time. There's 60 seconds in a minute. There's 60 minutes in an hour. There's 24 hours in a day. There's 7 days in a week. There's 52 weeks in a year. It's very rigid. Whereas in this origin story, when Mother and Father step out of the darkness, that could have taken aeons for us. But they've stepped out along with the essence. We don't know much about the essence, but the one thing we do know is this essence has an insatiable hunger to grow and to learn and to understand as much as it can. So much so, and grow and expand, so much so that could be why Mother and Father got kicked out of the reality of the before, because they just ran out of space. The essence is constantly wanting to grow and expand itself, and part of it has bled into the unfound anamnesis. And after time goes on, Mother and Father gain the ability to communicate with the essence very clearly. Now, Mother and Father are very powerful entities. Their power is creation. And Mother and Father, speaking with the essence, they communicate back and forth and say, hey, essence, you want to learn lessons, right? Well, let's strike up a deal. What we'll do is we'll take part of you. The essence exists in all things. It can be used to create all things, all resources. They say, hey, we'll take part of you and we'll shape it. First, we'll shape it into a planet. And then we'll populate that planet with different vegetation and different entities on it, right? Animals, things like that. And then what we'll do is we'll take this essence and we'll shape you into a being that we'll place on that planet. So you can learn this lesson from a different angle. The essence likes that, right? So they strike up a deal, and Mother and Father begin to create. They create planets, they create life, they create everything on that planet, and then they put beings on that planet. And then they really manipulate the day-to-day of that being. So the essence, which that being is, can learn its lesson. The essence is going in conscious of who it is and why it's there. And it's Mother and Father's job to just make sure that continues to happen. Now, very, very powerful beings, right? If you can do that for one person, Mother and father first do that for one person and then dozens and then hundreds of people, pulling the strings, right, from their vantage point, where if that being needs to learn a lesson that has to do with water, it's mother or father's job to give an outside force or an internal desire to that being to seek out water. If they need to learn something about love, then it's mother and father's job to pull that internal desire or give them an external force to put that being in alignment with something or someone that he or she loves. But they're also doing it for this person, and they're also doing it for this person, and this person, and this person. So we're starting to get this view of how powerful mother and father are. But they do have a limit. And that's the challenge that starts to occur when one planet becomes dozens, which becomes hundreds. And in those planets, there's hundreds or thousands of people. Mother and father's ability reaches a breaking point, and the essence still wants to learn, still wants to grow. Essence isn't done. Mother and father are getting close to it. They need to think of something. And we're going to talk about what they come up with in our next video. We're going to realize that father and mother do have different views on this. One of them is going to be driven and rigid and wanting to do what is said to them. One of them wants to be creative, nurturing, think outside the box, and give them, mother and father, a different way of helping this essence. Who's going to win over? What's going to happen? And what are the effects going to be? Stay tuned. Next episode. If you like this, drop a like, please subscribe. And if you have any cool names, maybe we name the essence something. Maybe we name mother and father something really cool. Drop them in the comments. Ask us what questions that you have. Because when you're creating an origin story, that's where plot holes can exist. We'd love to hear, is there anything that you're seeing that could be a plot hole? Is there anything that this reminds you of that we can use to stem off of to create the unfound anamnesis? We're making this with you, and we're making this for you. Really hope you enjoy it. Again, my name's Dylan, and I'll see you in the next video.